welcome to the Teaching Corner. Today I wanted to talk to you about math manipulatives. As a new teacher, sometimes it can be overwhelming to know what kind of manipulatives you should get for your students, or if you're working with your kids at home, if you're an itinerant teacher or a tutor traveling around. Manipulatives can be very expensive. Sometimes you'll get blessed if you work in the school system. They may already have some math manipulatives for you, but if you're like me and I wasn't in that situation and I had to purchase things for myself, it can get very pricey. So one of the things that I would suggest first of all would be Unifix cubes, and the reason I would say this is it's a very versatile thing. You can even use Unifix cubes if you're tutoring in reading, using the different cubes for different sounds, tapping out different sounds. You could also use it in story writing, where each different colored cube is first this happened, then this happened, then this happened. But for math, you can use them in all sorts of ways. You can use them for counting. You can say, okay, if I have 2 and then I have 4, 2 plus 4, and they can count them. You can use it for fractions. You can use it for equivalent fractions, where they're comparing one color to another. I've even seen some teachers use it for various types of measurements. So Unifix cubes are very, very versatile. So if you can only afford to get one thing, that would be my suggestion. I just recently did a video on the importance of place value, and I'll put a link to that down below. But I would also say, if you can afford them, they're rather pricey, but if you can afford to get base 10 blocks, then those are also another great visual representation for kids to understand the difference between ones, tens, and hundreds, and thousands. The next thing I would say for younger kids is to get a clock that has fixed gears inside. I would not recommend getting a clock that just has a brad and floppy arms, because many of our kids struggle to understand, is this is going around, this should automatically be going around as well. The great thing about this clock in particular, and it's from Learning Resources, is that it's self-correcting. So if the child said, oh, this is 2:30, then they would open this up and they would say, oh no, it's not, it's 3:30. And so they could self-correct and understand that they had it wrong. Another thing that I really love about this is for kids who are struggling with elapsed time, they can put it on the original time. Like, let's say that the class started at 5:05 and it went for 20 minutes. They can count 5, 10, 15, 20. What time is that? Well, I can look, if I don't know what time that is, and see that it's 5:25. So I would suggest a clock like this. And then the last thing that I would suggest is some kind of play money. You can get this in many different places. If there's a store that has like a play cash register or something like that. The only caution that I would say, and I did a video on the one more than strategy, and I'll put that down below, is if you have maybe really young children, or if you have someone with intellectual disabilities that's struggling to understand and isn't generalizing really well, plastic play money may not be the way to go, because it doesn't have the same feel, the same weight, the same look as real money. So when I was in a self-contained high school classroom, we actually dealt with real dollar bills. Now, I kept them locked in a drawer so that they didn't walk off one day, but we always worked with real money so that they could associate those as they were trying to figure things out. As your kids get a little bit older, another thing that I think is wonderful, and I'll put a link down below to my modified multiplication chart that I did, but doing a number chart for kids, or doing the multiplication chart. I don't think I actually grabbed that one. The multiplication chart for kids, so that they have an easy reference. If you have kids that are really struggling with memorization skills, that might be something that you have them do at the beginning of class every day, that they fill out their multiplication chart, and then they have that as a visual reference. And then for some kids, you may just need to put it on their desk. That's why they do make stickers where you could just stick it to the desk, so they always have that reference if they have working memory or short-term memory skill difficulties. Another thing that's great is a thing called wrap-ups for multiplication, and this is great because it goes all the way from 1 to 1 to 10. So you just pick whichever one, you know, your kids are struggling with, and they start on this side, and you would say 1 times 4 is 4, and then 3 times 4 is 12, and they keep going and going. And then when they flip it over, if they've done it correctly, their little lines will match up with the lines on the back. So it's also self-correcting, so they know if they got the right answers. But this, I found, is fun if you've got some kids who are struggling. Sometimes I've had kids who struggle with dexterity issues, so I might actually hold it and wrap it while they're shouting out the answers to me or things like that. But it's just a fun little way to keep them engaged but help them with their multiplication skills. And then lastly, is fractions. Fractions are really hard for kids, and so a visual way for them to understand that would be fraction circles. And the fractions can be very difficult for kids, so for them to be able to see them and compare them to one another is really important. So in fraction circles, you have the whole, and then they continue to cut that down more and more, so it'll be a different color, and then it'll be half, and then you have another color that is fourths. But the cool thing about this is kids can lay them on top of each other and say, oh, well, 2/4 is the same as 1/2. So they can compare fractions, and then they can also see which fraction is larger than another fraction in a physical way. The only difficulty that I would say, and I think you may have heard some of them falling, is sometimes the little pieces can get scattered. So I have seen sometimes where there's fraction rods, and sometimes that's a little bit easier for kids. But having a visual way to represent fractions is also really good. So I hope that was helpful. If it was, please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you later. Bye.